Hello and welcome to another Revel Coach conversation. Every week we get a chance to celebrate another woman who is inspiring us, and we are able to learn about her journey and her work through these interviews. So on behalf of my sister, Alison, Nissen, and I, we want to welcome Kate Stollenwerck, who is joining us today from Ponte Vedra. And Kate, welcome to the show. We appreciate you being here.
I'm very excited to be here with the both of you.
So a little background, Kate is not only a phenomenal author who is launching her first book, she is also a good friend of mine. And she's kind of been on this Revel Coach journey for a few years together. And so she knows kind of the basis of our platform has started with this simple question of asking, maybe I could, and taking you back to a moment in time where you ponder something significant and you think with wonder, like, maybe I could do this. So Kate, can I just ask the first question of take us back in time when you pondered that question and you said, maybe I could write a book and publish as an author?
Sure. Well, this dream has been a long time in the making for me. I first thought I wanted to be a writer, an author when I was in law school. It's very typical. You'll meet many, many authors who are recovering attorneys. I like to say we're recovering attorneys. So I wrote a novel while I was a 1L, which is insane. And it was horrible. So I kind of, threw it away. It was such a long time ago. I don't even have a digital copy of it anymore. But I held on to that dream, and I got out of law school, and I had this very naive sense that I would, work at a big corporate law firm in downtown Chicago and have all this free time to write my great novel after work. And of course that didn't happen. I was working all the time. And then I got married and I had my first child, decided to stay home. And my husband, who was so sweet, knew that this was a dream that I was still holding on to. And my push present was actually this antique typewriter with this beautiful message he had put on it about, hoping that I would, finally get down and finish this novel, write this great novel that I wanted to do. Again, very naive about how the time involved with a newborn and being a mom when I had zero experience. So again, that didn't happen. I will say there was a little break where I had about, my second child and my first are 3 years apart. And I did try. I probably attempted 3 or 4 different times, 30, 40 pages I would get into, and then I would get stuck or life would interrupt. And those manuscripts never got finished. And they just sat on, they traveled from home to home, and they lived in my linen closet from literally 2000, when was Luca born? 11, until I pulled them out into the summer of 2019. And no, sorry, Luca was not 2011. I don't even know when my kids are born. 2009 to 2019. So 10 years I had not written anything. And I was cleaning out this linen closet. You know how it's so amazing when this happens. You find stuff. You're like, oh my God, I forgot I did that. And it was these 3 or 4 stories. And if you had told me I had written those stories, I wouldn't have believed you because I had completely forgotten it. One of them, I felt like, I can write this story, and actually I know the ending of the story, and I'm not a plotter. I'm what's called a pantser in writing, which means you simply sit down and you write. So there was never none of these manuscripts ever had like a full plot or a full story. And this one was about these 5 friends, and I thought, I can finish this story. I actually know how this story is going to go. So I sat down, and I don't know what, I think, just reaching a point in life where my youngest had gone back to school. I was looking to go in a new direction and thinking what's next for me. And I kind of was getting off the merry-go-round of doing every volunteer activity in my community. I played enough tennis. I was good. I'm like, what's next? And I want to do something more meaningful. And that really speaks to who I am and my soul. And so I just went for it. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. I had no expectation of really anything coming of it. But I finished it. And then that kind of just started this journey of really committing myself to becoming an author.
That is so great. So Kate, when you were thinking about you go all in, you're like, I'm going to be an author. And I'm going to ask you eventually to give a little insight on what your story is all about after I ask this question. And so you kind of get to the point where like, all right, I'm going to actually go for this. How did you bubble yourself up? Or I don't know whether you need confidence to do it, time to do it, or how do you kind of get into that zone where you can really just kind of free flow and write the type of book that you just wrote?
Well, I'll start with the first one because that really launched my belief that I could do it. And I think because it was about 80 pages written and I had a clear vision for where the story was going, I simply just, I just was excited. I knew the story was in me. And so the kids would go to school and I would sit and write for 2 or 3 hours. And that's really all writing requires. But, I was doing that 6 days a week. I mean, I would write on the weekends, and then I'm the type that I print it out and I edit at night and I think about the story and the characters when I'm driving my kids around to all their activities. So once I finished that first novel, I think I realized, okay, like I did it. And I had an editor. I hired an editor because I've never taken a writing class. I've never been in a writing group. So again, maybe some of my confidence was from stupidity because I just was so naive about being an author. But I had this editor who she looked at that story and there were a million things she thought were wrong with it, which is what a good editor will do. But she did say, and I kind of had lost confidence, and felt a little imposter syndrome kicking in with her critique. And she was like, no, but you're a writer. Like you wrote this in 2 months. You're a writer. And it was just her saying that to me. That was that little spark, like, okay. And we all understand that writing, particularly novels, it's so subjective, right? Art is subjective. And so what someone else loves, someone might hate. So, particularly when you're an author, you have to take criticism and you have to take editors' comments and feedback with a grain of salt, because you might simply artistically not agree with what they're saying. But there was a lot of fundamentally things wrong with the structuring of the story and character development and all these things that I really took to heart and thought about. And then when I moved on to the second story, the second novel, which is what is coming out, my book, as I stand here, hello, goodbye, plug. I was so much more well-equipped and I think in a good place as a writer to understand the beats of a story and the structure and the character development and thematically what needed to take place, for me to be able to get to the point where I felt like I had something that would really appeal to people and I could sell in the marketplace.
Kate, as a pantser, how did you keep everything together? Because without some sort of plot or structure, not plot, but like plotting it out and creating a structure and a framework. And when you add in multiple characters and you add in multiple locations, everything gets a little muddy. So how did you keep it all straight?
So with Hello Goodbye, because the first one we don't really talk about because I didn't even publish it, but that was easy because it took place over a weekend at a wedding, right? And so there's like the beats of a wedding weekend. That was the structure that I was working around, right? And that was pretty simple to do. This story, my brain felt crowded a lot, if that makes sense, because as a pantser, because I had a broad outline, like I said, I know I haven't told this story. So this story kind of came to me. I knew I wanted to tell this story about a granddaughter and a grandmother. And you can have these moments of just creative inspiration. I have a big fan of Masterclass and listen to Amy Tan talk about the author of the Joylet Club, about how she's had these moments in her writing career where it almost feels like it's a God thing or there's some creative being just channeling through her. And this story was just so clear to me, how it came to me. I was on a beach walk. It was during COVID. I was missing my parents. I was missing connection. I was missing, my family all lives in other states. We were 6 months in. I think I was just very reflective on all the things I knew I wanted to put into this story thematically. And so I went for this 1.5-hour beach walk. And I had the basic beats of the story in my head. I knew that maybe 4 or 5 really big moments that were going to happen. I just didn't know how I was going to get there, right? And so as a pantser, it is interesting. I had enough of about halfway this might happen, and then I know where we're going to get at the end. But really for me, I would write a scene and then I would end it knowing where I was going in the next scene. And that was enough, right? And then a lot of it came in the editing process. I mean, I spent a year editing. I wrote the story in 2 months, but spent a year editing. And I think that's as a pantser, where a lot of that, okay, is this all connecting, right? Is this Am I leaving? Is it sloppy in places? Is, there, and that's again where beta readers were invaluable to me, because readers who, I probably had 30 people who were beta readers read it and really, be like, well, what about that? You said that, and that doesn't make sense. And, kind of like, because you can get stuck in a story where you've read it 1,000 times that you miss some of these like little nuances that a first time reader catches.
But
I felt like my head was crowded because there are a lot of characters in my story. And so that's why I kind of had to shut down socially, because I needed to focus. Does that make sense? Like just what was going on in my story.
Well, it makes sense to me because I'm not a writer, so I couldn't imagine pulling off what you pulled off. And I kind of mentioned this, I was fortunate enough to read it, and it is just such a beautiful, rich story. It is just, as you brought different characters to life, I could live in their shoes and feel their feelings. And then I could feel the awkwardness, or I could feel the excitement or the fear and all that stuff. So really well done. Can I ask you about the beta readers? Was your daughter, I know you told me the story about your daughter, your daughter and her friends helping you with giving specifics in the book. Were they beta readers or?
They were. So Penny, my daughter Penny was one of the first readers. My mom was the first reader, and then she was probably second or third. So it's funny, it's so different from that first read, but I really looked to her for language, and she had 2 friends who read it, and they were really helpful. And then just a couple of places that I wanted to make sure it felt authentic to them, because like even the party scene where they go to this like field and there's drinking, that was kind of based on what we did. And so like, I was like, they're like, no, I mean, it's in Texas and we're in Florida, so take a beach for somebody's ranch, right? But the idea was the same. So there were just little places where they helped me with language. For example, I put the word dork in the book, and they're like, we don't say that word. And they're like, you don't? And they're like, no, like we don't say that word. And I was like, well, what would you say? They're like, well, we would just call them weird. Like everyone is just weird if you're not like, I don't know. These things were interesting to me. I was like, okay.
Well, it's funny because I didn't know that part that you had shared with me later. And I was reading the book on the plane with my daughter, who is a couple years older than Penny, but there are certain parts of it. It was like, I'm like cringing for the 15-year-old. Like I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I'd make Katie read the paragraph without being spoiler alert before she read it. And she's like, that was really good. And then you told me that, your daughter.
Yes. No, they were really my 315. It was Penny and 2 of her friends. They were some of my best beta readers, just really bright girls that love to read. And they were fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's what I love about the book, is it really pulls you in. Like it's a great beach read, but it also has the historical fiction to it too. Right. Can I ask any roots to some of the stories you brought to life that had some of the historical fiction? How did you do research?
Oh, definitely. I think you always draw from your family. So not to give away too much, but one of my grandmothers was kind of legendary for her tall tales, and she was the most amazing storyteller, but nobody's entirely sure how much of it was true. And so that was kind of, I think we all have that family member, and that's kind of what the bummer about ancestry.com and the internet is because you can kind of blow up these great family legends, right? that have been passed down through the generations of, but no, my other grandmother is actually from Malone, Texas. I've never been. It's just this little bitty podunk town in Central Texas, and that's where the story takes place. And then the World War II aspect of it was heavily influenced. My husband's family was in the Holocaust. They were not Jewish, they were Polish, but they were taken and in camps. And in my acknowledgments in the back, I thank his grandmother, who I met right after we married, and she told us her stories of being taken by the Nazis and her time in a concentration camp. So I just love history. One of my favorite shows is Finding Your Roots by Dr. Henry Louis Gates on PBS, and it's all about celebrities going and tracing their ancestry. And another show that kind of inspired this in a crazy way was there's a show on the History Channel called Hunting Hitler. It's kind of, I'm not sure how much of it is true, but a lot of the basics is true, is that these Nazis, they got out of Germany and they went to South America, and it's kind of hard to imagine that they just were able to go down there and like live these normal lives. So all of that, I was a history major in college, all that kind of I just love, I think I think this generation particularly, I was worried with COVID, the detachment from their grandparents, and they're so on their phones and they're not just sitting and talking to people, right? And so there was a lot of purposeful in the book how language is used between the generations. So Hailey and her grandmother never communicated via cell phone, right? And Hailey and her mother almost always strictly text. It's just kind of how we communicate and, how we engage with each other. And I think that's part of the charm for Hailey with her grandmother is she has time for her and she makes time for her. And it's just this old fashioned, talking about life and, the minor inconsequential details that are so significant, like you both like to paint your nails,
Right. The little details.
Right. And you like to wear makeup and look pretty. And, so yeah, there was definitely a lot of my own experiences with my grandmothers. They were very feminine, very strong, funny women who I greatly admired. And that's part of what I was trying to capture in Gigi.
Kate, I understand this is going to be released on August 2nd.
Yes.
And so what's your plan for release? Do you have a book tour? Do you have a release party? What's the big plan?
Yes, I do have a book tour that is shaping up. I'm going to be at the Book Loft in Amelia Island on August 4th, which is this fantastic bookstore here locally, about 45 minutes from here. And then I'm doing a book launch party here in Jacksonville later in August. And then I'm going to Dallas and I'm going to be, the book takes place in Texas and I'm born and raised in Dallas. I'm going to be at Barnes & Noble on the SMU campus, and I'm going to be at my hometown public library, which I'm really excited about. So I've got a few other things I'm working on right now that might come together, but that's gonna take me into fall. And then obviously, I've got a couple of Zoom calls set up with some other libraries in Texas, and we'll see what shakes out.
Well, and it's going to be so exciting because I think one thing's going to lead to another, because once the mystery's out and people are reading the book, I know there's going to be a lot of people referring it and getting out there, but
yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. And so can you tell us, like, when it comes to an author publishing, how can your readers support you? What types of, what's kind of your ask for help, and how can we help?
It's so being an indie author, particularly, it feels like a mountain to climb as far as, getting, you don't have the big four publishing houses out there, as the engine of your marketing and your social media and those things. So if you read it and you like it, please write a review on Goodreads or Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you bought the book from. If you have friends that are readers, tell them about the book, spread the word. Book clubs are huge. A lot of books take off organically. It is word of mouth. It still is one of these industries that word of mouth is incredibly powerful. Share it on social media, share it when you open your book and get it on pub day or whenever you've ordered it. If you tag me and post it like that, with these metrics of Amazon and Facebook and Instagram, it all matters. I know for Amazon, the magic number is 50 reviews, that it kind of triggers something in their metrics and gets you showing up on people's feed. And so all of that is really important. But yeah, it's just, if you read it and you enjoy it, pass it on to someone else, write a review, recommend it to a book club. All of those things are super helpful.
Yes, definitely having a selfie with the book and then tagging Kate. That's what you need to do.
Yes, you'd be like, oh my God, it came.
That's right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give you I am so excited for you when you get the box that comes in the mail and you get to open it up and there are like a whole bunch of them right there. There's nothing quite like that feeling. It's a little surreal. Finally, our final question, you've taken this journey from, being an attorney and thinking, well, maybe I could become a novelist, and then you put it to the side. What's next?
I really am hoping that this is kind of my act 3. I always like to think of life in 4 acts, and act 1 was, getting to college and coming out of my parents, in my home. And act 2 has been raising my family and my career in my 20s. And, now I'm pivoting act 3. My kids will be leaving home, which is hard to imagine, but, in 7 or 8 years, I'll be an empty nester. So I'm hoping that it's a writing career. I'm hoping that, that's why, as much as I would like to be writing the next novel, so much I have to sell this book. I have to learn how to sell this book so that people will want to read something else. And so I've been trying to spend a lot of time learning how to market, learning how to sell books, which they don't teach authors, right? Authors want to be hidden away in a room writing. They don't want to be out selling themselves. But, in today's world, the numbers are staggering. I think last year, 1.6 million books were published, new titles, with the advent of self-publishing particularly. But, it's really hard to have a shelf life and get traction on. There's a lot of good books out there that people don't know about. So right now my focus is, okay, for the next 3 to 6 months, sell. When I'm not selling, write. And hopefully get moving on, building a career as a writer.
Okay, we are thrilled for you. Like, congratulations. Absolutely amazing. And before we say goodbye, could you share how somebody can get in touch with you? What's the best way to get your book, get in touch with you?
The best way to get my book is, obviously, it's available at all major retailers online. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target, you name it, it's out there. I would say follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I have a website, but I don't really see the point of a website other than to direct you to where you can buy it, or Instagram or Facebook. So Kate Stollenwerck author is my handle on both social media platforms.
Well, Kate Stollenwerck, we have been so happy to be able to speak to you. And Alison, Nissen, Marcy, Stoudt, my sister, we are Revel Coach. And today you've been listening to a Revel Coach plus Kate conversation. So join us every week as we interview another extremely exciting and interesting person. Thank you all for stopping by.